Hey everyone. I thought I'd make a video on toxic maximalism because everyone loves to talk about how toxic Bitcoiners are, including Bitcoiners. Everyone is complaining about it lately. It's not just shitcoiners, it's not just old school economists. Everyone is just sick of everyone else. Everyone is furious. To me, this is all just beautiful and the result of a community where there are no leaders and everyone is just getting driven nuts by everyone else. I like it. Um, there's so many things to think about when it comes to toxic maximalism and maximalism in the first place. Because let's start. Where did it even come from? Um, it came from Vitalik Buterin, the inventor and maintainer and guy in charge of Ethereum, and he naturally was asked some difficult questions by a lot of Bitcoiners when he invented Ethereum, and a lot of those questions don't have good answers. And he did that thing that everyone does, or your girlfriend does, when you're losing an argument, and she says you're being mean because you're actually correct. So there's nothing really left to say, but you're still the one that's got to apologize, right? So he said Bitcoiners are. Well, he didn't call us toxic at the time. He just said we were being maximalists. And he says Bitcoin maximalists, he invented the term, and it's supposed to imply, it carries with it this implication that we are narrow-minded and dismissive of things that are not Bitcoin, and it's to our own detriment and to Bitcoin's detriment, and it's exclusionary and it turns people off, and we need to change our mentality, because if we don't, people won't become Bitcoiners, and then everyone suffers, and why couldn't you guys just be nicer, and yada yada yada. And this is just such it's such a stupid and upside down way to see this whole thing, because I've switched, guys. I've switched. I tell people not to buy Bitcoin now, unless they really mean it and they really deserve it. I don't want to spend 6 hours convincing someone to buy Bitcoin and telling them it's the best thing around, and then they go and buy a bunch of shitcoins. Because it's a waste of my time. It's really disappointing. It makes me feel like I'm not good at what I do, which is to a large extent just being an advocate for Bitcoin. But I see this happen all the time, and I've decided it doesn't even work psychologically anyway. To be psychologically, the best way to get people into Bitcoin is to tell them it's too complicated for them. They wouldn't understand it. There's too much maths. Don't worry about it. Go and buy a shitcoin. When you tell people that, they get much more excited. And they're much more likely to do some work for themselves. They want to be part of this exclusive club. So, I'm rambling, but the point with maximalism is, to some extent, they're right there. Like, just give up on the maximalism. Give up trying to get everyone orange-pilled when you meet them. Screw it. Let people make mistakes. This is the one. I'm going to extend this olive branch, because this is the one true thing about criticism of Bitcoin maximalists. Why are we trying so hard? Forget it. Let people make all the mistakes. Let economists come out there and complain that it has no intrinsic value and it's got a fundamental value of zero, and blah blah blah, and all of these nonsense claims that don't mean anything, that you can't even debate about because they're not even presented in a genuine fashion in the first place. They're just throwaway criticisms that you can't defend, because if you try and defend it, they move goalposts and you go crazy, and they get more followers. So screw that. The term maximalism literally means different things to different people, but to me it literally just means someone that thinks things that aren't Bitcoin are nowhere near as good as Bitcoin, within the same realm at least. So if you're another cryptocurrency, you're not just not as good as Bitcoin, you're literally completely, usually the opposite of what Bitcoin stands for and what Bitcoin offers. Because you don't just, if you come along on your Litecoin, for example, a very early example of sort of people trying to make the claim that you can be Bitcoin, you can just be kind of not as good, like silver is to gold. That was always the claim. But silver is, in some essential ways, never going to be what gold is, because it's not the apex predator. And this is being overly generous in an analogy to shitcoins. Silver has not maintained purchasing power at all like gold has. Gold has a different function to silver. They are both precious metals. They are both fundamentally scarce in some fashion. But the difference is, people won't be able to use silver as a store of value like gold. It's not a backup. It doesn't do what gold does, because this is a winner-takes-all game to some extent. And this is the truth when it comes to all monetary instruments. And Bitcoin is... You're not going to have a plethora of currencies that all serve similar functions and all kind of do things, and some of them are a bit better than others. And this was the world created for us by Andreas and this back in 2014 and 2015, when I would watch every one of his videos, and that was the only part that never resonated with me, because he was such a pioneer. And the first time I ever heard the word maximalist was when Andreas said, "I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist." And I was like, okay, I mean, because I like to, when you follow someone's thoughts and you learn a lot from them, you question yourself very quickly. If they say something that doesn't seem right to you, you think, oh, I must be wrong about something here, because I learned so much from Andreas. And when he said he's not a Bitcoin maximalist, I was like, okay, and I kept trying to keep an open mind to all the scam coins, right? So... But I mean, there was just nothing there. In 2013 and 2014 and 2015, there was nothing of any interest. I remember when Ethereum launched, and honestly, it took me about a day before I thought, this thing is making like 1 billion times the amount of promises Bitcoin makes, and Bitcoin we treat with a healthy dose of skepticism. It was only around 2017 that I suddenly became like, oh, nothing can destroy Bitcoin. It took me a long time to become that confident with it, and that was 6 years after I got into Bitcoin. I was always fascinated by it and interested by it, and I always wanted in my heart for it to become what it is becoming today. But I never really believed it could, like after we won the fork wars in 2017. That was when I was like, okay, it's over, it's won. But Bitcoin makes very simple claims, and it works incredibly hard to be able to maintain the properties it needs to be able to support to maintain itself and be able to withstand all the onslaughts it suffers and all of these things. Bitcoin makes these claims, and it says, I need to be this to be able to do that, and the amount of effort everyone goes to maintain these properties, and thinking of every single edge case and being as adversarial in their mindset as possible. There is so much of that, and all of it means you spend years going, what about this? What about this? What about centralization in ASIC manufacture? What about too much mining going on in China? What about the scaling issues we face? What about the onboarding onto the Lightning Network? What about the lack of people running nodes, even though we've kept the resource requirement as small as possible? What about the lack of interest from the community? What about people keeping their coins not in self-custody and all this stuff? All of these concerns we are more worried about than any of Bitcoin's critics. People going Bitcoin maximalists are so narrow-minded. They think everything else sucks and Bitcoin's amazing. I'm like, you guys never come to Bitcoin with any legitimate criticisms, ever. Your criticisms of Bitcoin are always absolute nonsense, like, oh, it's MySpace, and Ethereum is like Facebook. Like, this is such a stupid criticism to make, because you're criticizing a network and you're pretending it's a website, which is, you're missing the whole point. Bitcoin is a dominant network, and people don't use suboptimal networks because of some extra tiny feature, when it doesn't offer any of the things that the first thing offered in the first place. That doesn't happen. Otherwise, we would not be using the internet. We'd be using something better by now. That's just the reality of it. And so, I mean, we've got all these people launching these absurd criticisms of Bitcoin maximalism and saying that we're now toxic. And we get this on Twitter a lot. And I literally see these people saying, like, Bitcoin would be, a dominant world currency by now. The dollar would be dead if if we didn't have this problem of toxic Bitcoin maximalists. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? There is no requirement in Bitcoin for people to be nice to anyone in order for Bitcoin to see. You don't. It's not a factor in Bitcoin's success whether the people that champion it are pushovers and will put up and tolerate scammers all the time and just have infinite patience for people that literally only want to scam anyway. That's so ridiculous to think that I see it all the time. There's never a day passes where people don't go, Bitcoin, yeah, it's great, but the community's so toxic. I have to see this every day. And I'm like, first off, we're not. And like, there are 2 points here. If we were, it shouldn't matter. If Bitcoin needs people to be nice to each other on Twitter or social media, more tolerant of, let's say they're not scammers, but just altcoiners, okay. If it requires that, it's fucked. And I'm taking all my money out straight away, because Bitcoin is not going to have that. All right. We're not going to be nice to each other. We're not a company with a PR department. You're not going to see a promoted tweet by the Bitcoin company that shows a bunch of smiling, people in wheelchairs and women and like minorities and rainbow flags and all that stuff. You're not going to see any of that bullshit. We're not a PR friendly company. It's not going to happen. Bitcoin is a real people, and we're real, and we mean this shit, and we're serious about it, which is why we don't want to pander to bullshit. But all that said, supposing we didn't give a fuck about that, and it was the other factor that mattered, which escapes me right now. I was making another, I'm saying they're never making these claims in a genuine fashion. They're like, because we're not even toxic. Bitcoiners are not toxic people. We tend to engage in debates honestly, and we call out people when they're being disingenuous, because people will come along and say, oh, Bitcoin is been crippled by the core developers. That's why blocks were kept small. It's because they were compromised by an intelligence agency. And I'm like, okay, let's entertain that for a while. Okay, I went on Disclose.tv's Telegram chat today because they were doing a stream, and I love Disclose.tv. They're great. They've got like 1 million followers. The great source of news, obvious agenda. That agenda fits my agenda. I love that kind of news. I hate the news that pretends to be unbiased, and it's totally obviously not, and they have an agenda and they pretend they don't. I much prefer the news that will say something out like we support Hillary Clinton or we support Donald Trump. Fine, that's news. I can deal with that because I know what the bias is. I know where the honesty. I know what the alignment is, and they're not pretending not to have one. So I went in their chat today, and they had a stream going, and they were saying Satoshi has his identity's finally revealed. It's Craig Wright, as confirmed by a court. So now that Satoshi's identity is known, what effect does this have on Bitcoin? I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Put my hand up. Went and spoke to one of the commentators who believed firmly that Craig is Satoshi and all this stuff, and had a bunch of arguments. I learned how to, ninja combat back 4 years ago. So when I hear these things now, I'm like, oh, you don't even have a chance here. And I got a bunch of DMs from people saying like, oh my God, you just slayed that dude. And I must say, credit to myself, I managed to keep my calm rather than just laugh at the dude and make my side of everything look stupid. I've learned that you just ask the right questions. It's a much better way of combating misinformation than telling people the truth. Ask them the question that they can't answer. It's so much better. So you ask people things like, when it comes to what happens in Bitcoin, I'm not saying Craig isn't Satoshi. I'm saying, if Craig's Satoshi, why hasn't he signed any of the things that only Satoshi will be able to sign? I mean, this is Bitcoin. It's the most easy thing in the world to prove you're the owner of the coins. The guy was like, no, that's not how ownership works. The court says he owns it. That's how real life works. I'm like, huh? Okay. I mean, and everyone in the room's like, yeah, that's absolute nonsense, isn't it? Like, if you claim to be the owner of the Bitcoins that were mined in the first, few hundred blocks of Bitcoin's existence, and you want to prove you're the person that mined them, Bitcoin has a mechanism for that, and it's mathematically something that just cannot be faked. So Craig really does do you agree that Craig wants to be recognized as the guy that invented Bitcoin? Yes or no? Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious he wants to be recognized as the guy that invented Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, so here's the thing he can do in 5 seconds if he is that guy. Remember, there was no multi-sig around back then. He's the guy. If he's Satoshi, he has those private keys. He mined those coins. He can come out and say he burnt them, but he never does. And this was the guy's response to me. He's like, oh, he's done that in private with people. I'm like, well, then only those people are going to, if those people come out and acknowledge it, which they did. Gavin did. Gavin came out and acknowledged it. And then about a week later went, yeah, I was tricked somehow. I don't know how. And we were like, what happened exactly? How did he prove it to you? And he's like, okay, we went into a hotel and, We went in a hotel room together and he signed some stuff that only Satoshi could sign. And we're like, okay, what did he sign them on? And they're like, oh, a laptop. And we're like, whose laptop was it? Craig's. So it wasn't your laptop, Gavin? No, it wasn't. You didn't think that was a little bit of a setup, right? You're going to the second most famous and influential developer in Bitcoin's history. You're meeting him in a hotel room and you bring your own laptop and you sign something privately that you refuse to show to the rest of the world that would demonstrate without any shadow of a doubt that this guy is who he claims he is and who he wants to be seen as. No, he's not going to do that. He's just going to sign it in private to you with a laptop that he brought. Seems fishy, right? Do you believe that? So again, it's just questions. But anyway, all this just comes across as super toxic to people that don't want to hear the truth. But the truth hurts, man. You got to deal with it. And at the end of the day, we're only telling you it because we think Bitcoin is the greatest thing ever, and we want you to come with us. And it's a life raft, and we don't want to see everyone drown in shitcoins and fiat. We want everyone on the ark with us, and we want you to come. That's our motivation here, and we're sorry if we come across like dicks doing it, but we're not dicks. We're nice and patient, and I watch Luke, for fuck's sake. Luke is basically the oldest dev still around in Bitcoin. He's done more for Bitcoin than anyone else I know of outside of Satoshi. And I watch him every day have long, rambling Twitter engagements with someone with 8 followers who's asking very primitive questions, who will even start out like, hostile towards Luke. Like, oh, lol, Luke, you don't know anything about Bitcoin. And then someone will chime in and be like, yeah, I don't think you know who this guy is. And then I'll watch them talk a bit and I'll see like Luke just patiently explain things about Bitcoin. We love Bitcoin. We'll explain it to anyone that wants to ask. And we have very little patience for people that obviously are full of shit. And those people that are obviously full of shit, like Vinny Lingham and Brian Armstrong and Vitalik Buterin, all these people that want to label us as toxic, they can, but it's only because they're trying to sell you something, and that thing is not Bitcoin, and they are under the incredibly perverse incentive that they want Bitcoin to be seen as shitter than it is in order to make the thing they're offering seem better than it is. But in reality, Bitcoin is holding up the entire crypto space. If Bitcoin were ever to go the way of the dodo, like they pretend it's going to, like, oh, Bitcoin's dead, there's going to be a flippening. That was a long-term narrative. There's going to be a flippening where a shitcoin becomes dominant over Bitcoin, like Ethereum's the obvious candidate, or Bcash, or Litecoin, or some other bullshit. They're always saying, or Dogecoin, for God's sake, they're always saying that. But these things aren't built to last. These things are flash-in-the-pan casino tokens, and they cannot take the pressure that Bitcoin can take. Bitcoin can take so much heat and pressure because it's so decentralized that it doesn't matter what you throw at it, you get it thrown back at you. Every time you attack Bitcoin, you get wrecked for it. You get absolutely trolled. I've never seen anyone get in such a tantrum like Elon Musk. Elon Musk has generally worn it well. The fame he has, the attention he has, and the risky shit he does with the memes he posts, and he's edgy from every now and again. He gets edgy, and he's survived. He's weathered every storm. But when he fucked with Bitcoiners, that was hilarious because we just hauled him over the coals and called him out on every bullshit claim he made, and he got so hurt by it that he became a Dogecoin maximalist. And it's really funny watching him go down with that ship, to be honest, because he's fucked. That was his public appeal. He pushed Doge as the people's crypto, and it's done nothing but decline since then. I mean, Bitcoin's at 46,000. It's down about 30% from its all-time high. Dogecoin's down about 80%. So you're doing really badly there. So this notion that we're toxic, man, it's just, I don't know what to say about it. We just see it. We come up against it every day. And I even see Bitcoiners now just being upset. Like genuine Bitcoiners just being upset with the idiots in the space. They're decrying now. Like, oh, Bitcoiners are so delusional. Like, I'm a Bitcoiner and I know so much. And other Bitcoiners are so stupid. And I'm like, yeah, again, though, what did you expect? What did you expect? Like, this thing is a global currency with no barrier to entry that is better than anything else offered by anyone, and it's going to be used by people that don't. If you want 8 billion people using your currency, which is what Bitcoin inevitably is, that doesn't mean 8 billion people understand it. Like I'd wager that like even my king mega giga Chad Michael Saylor doesn't even understand Bitcoin sometimes. Some of the things he says, I'm like, whoa, you actually don't get it. Like Michael Saylor totally understands what Bitcoin is, but he doesn't. He always tends to make mistakes when it comes to understanding how Bitcoin maintains its properties. Like he understands what properties it has, but he doesn't understand how to maintain those properties, or he doesn't champion them at least. He might be playing some deeper game, but I don't like crediting people with all this behind the scenes shit too much, or like in the background, or these Trojan horse theories. I think that's all nonsense. I just think every Bitcoiner thinks they know more about Bitcoin than everyone else. That's a part of it. But even that, I take that back. There's a lot of humble people out there that are learning, and I've tried to be as humble and as much of a sponge of knowledge as I possibly can be. But recently I've transitioned into trying to share what I have learned, because I've realized I've now I know enough that I'm actually more useful telling people what I know, instead of constantly lurking and trying to learn from the best people around, which is good because it feels like sharing, and I'm happy to do it. And I have been corrected on this channel loads of times. I've had people. This is another thing about us toxic maximalists. Like, I'm happy to sit down and learn with other apparently toxic people. I'm happy to be told shit I don't know. Like, if I'm listening to Jimmy Song, you know, I went to Jimmy Song's programming on the blockchain course, and it was one of the hardest, most brain ache things I've ever done in my life. He was kind enough to scholarship me into the thing, and it was 2 intensive days of like about 8 hours with like a 5-minute fucking break for lunch of just pure Python code for the entire time. And my Python is pretty rubbish, guys. I could barely keep up with it, but I learned a lot, and it was painful to do. And I'm pretty sure I can say I had the humility that I needed to be able to advance and increase my knowledge. Like, I learned it. I remember a couple of amazing tidbits of information from that class. You know, just so much about how transactions are structured, so much of the history, some of the bugs in Bitcoin, which are in all of the shitcoins, because they never even pay attention to bugs. They just lift Bitcoin's code, change a bunch of variables, and go, hey, we're innovating. And they don't even get rid of the bugs. Like the opcheck multisig, like has a, what is it, op1 or something on the stack for no reason, and you can't get rid of it in Bitcoin because you need a hard fork. But if you started Bitcoin again, you definitely get rid of that bug, and they just don't. They just leave it in every time because they're not actually paying attention to the bugs. They're just trying to scam people. And toxic maximalists are just, they are the guardians of, like, they're not, it's so funny because we're called toxic maximalists, but we are not actually toxic in our behavior at all, unless you're a scammer. And if you're a scammer, we'll call you out on it, and your only retort won't be, I'm not a scammer, this is my project, it's legitimate. No, all they ever do is they say, you're being mean, you're being toxic, and by the way, just to deflect more attention away from my scamming, I'm going to sit here and decry that Bitcoin's a wonderful project and these awful people are stopping the world from adopting it. How awful. Like, Elon Musk did this when Peter McCormack, who I can't stand, but he's still a relatively toxic Bitcoin maximalist, he said something, he said something about Elon being an idiot for not getting Bitcoin, and Elon responded like, it's tweets like this that make me want to go full Dogecoin and get rid of Bitcoin altogether, or something like, or make me want to sell all my Bitcoin. And this was so funny because we're like, dude, do it, just sell all your Bitcoin. We do not give a fuck. Like, we do not need you, we do not need to be nice to you. You are welcome to come. If you don't want to buy Bitcoin, that's your problem. It's not Bitcoin's problem. We don't need you here. Like, this is not 2011, okay? We are doing very well without the help of, fiat benefiting welfare state junkies like Elon, who get to pretend they're pioneers that are just really, it's just, I mean, Elon, what does he do? Post memes on, I celebrated him on this channel when Tesla first adopted Bitcoin, but it became very clear very quickly that he doesn't have a clue how Bitcoin works. So, and he's too butthurt and egomaniacal to actually listen to anyone that has a clue what they're talking about. I was a big blocker once, and I listened to people that understood more about it than me and were obviously speaking the truth. And I realized I'm wrong about this, and I learnt. That's what some people are just incapable of doing. And then when you see people that have a perspective you had 6 years ago, and you go, yeah, I used to think that, and then I learnt X, Y, Z, and you watch that person ignore X, Y, Z, you're like, okay, you don't want to learn. You have a position. You're egotistically attached to it, and you don't want to. You cannot step away from it now. So this is what it was like debating that BSV tard in Telegram today, in that Disclose TV stream. Because Disclose I get so much news from, man. And when I heard this BSV commentator there, he's like, yes, Craig is definitely Satoshi now. He's proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. He wants to turn Bitcoin back into what he originally thought it should be, blah, blah, blah. I was like, what are you fucking talking about? You have no clue what you're... My main point was, Craig obviously does not understand the cryptography that goes into Bitcoin in the first place. Satoshi did. He wrote it. So whoever Craig is, he's not the guy that wrote Bitcoin, because the guy that wrote Bitcoin actually understands how public key cryptography works. Craig doesn't. So what, like, I'm not getting into these pretend 4D chess things that the Craig cultists always do, which is, oh, he's just pretending that he doesn't understand. No, the guy's an idiot. He's got an IQ of about 70 and he doesn't understand what Bitcoin actually, how it's structured. He's like looking at a fucking skyscraper and going, yes, the wooden foundations of this, architects are going, they're not made of wood, dude. It would collapse if you made it out of that. And he's like, but I have a patent where you can use a wooden thing. And we're like, no, you fucking don't, okay? Those things are made out of steel, okay? If they weren't, that building would have collapsed. We know what we're talking about. This is the situation we look at with the BSV tards, and it's really fucking weird. I met one of them at Miami 2021 earlier this year, and they were just like, oh, Peter Todd is, a CIA agent. And I'm like, what? Like, even if I just zoom in on that tiny part of your argument, Gavin is the one who pushed for him to be Satoshi for Craig. He's the one who came out and said that. Gavin is the one who also pushed for big blocks, and Gavin is the one who openly went to the CIA to give a presentation on Bitcoin. And before doing so, he said to everyone on the Bitcoin Talk forum, I think that the goals of government and the cypherpunks are in alignment. What? So, I mean, these people are just so... Like, if you think that guy is not the spook, the one pushing for big blocks and all this bullshit and telling us Craig is Satoshi and saying I should become a dictator. But actually, that was Mike Hearn that said Gavin should become the benevolent dictator of Bitcoin. Mike Hearn's another fun one. He worked for GCHQ, which is the UK equivalent of the NSA, but worse. Less powerful, but also less constrained by constitutional rights, because the UK doesn't have a constitution. So GCHQ did a lot of the nasty shit that the NSA couldn't quite figure out a way to do, because while they were breaking a lot of laws, they weren't breaking every law. And they got GCHQ to do some bits that they couldn't do. Mike Hearn worked for them before he came and started fucking around in Bitcoin. He wrote, I think, Bitcoin J, which was a Java implementation of Bitcoin, I think. And yeah, then he just went nuts and was like, we need big blocks. Gavin's a dictator. We'll lobby mining pools to get this thing happening. We'll start with 20 megabyte blocks. Okay, 8 megabyte blocks. Okay, 2 megabyte blocks. Guys, you need to let us have 2 megabyte blocks. And then he rage quit, and that was great fun. That was January 2015 when Mike Hearn quit. A lot of fun stuff. And again, Mike, everyone, Gavin, Eric Voorhees, all of these people, they always resort to that one fucking thing, which is, you Bitcoiners, you're so toxic. And the minute someone says you're toxic, it's just that time where someone in an argument says you're being mean. And if someone says you're being mean in an argument, it means that you've won the argument, and the argument is no longer about what the argument is about. It's now about you personally, because, I mean, it's the ultimate ad hominem attack. Bitcoin is, the bigger our reputation for being toxic, the more of a testament that is to the fact that we are right about the claims we are making, and that no one has been able to debunk the claims that Bitcoiners are making. And that is why we have a reputation for being assholes, because people can't attack what we're actually claiming. They can only attack the characters of the people making the claims. So the more you hear about Bitcoiners being assholes, and the more you know it's a joke of a claim that somehow impedes the progress of the project, the more confidence you can have in the project. And this is hilarious. It's a completely counterintuitive thing. Just like, you know, when punitive laws get passed against Bitcoin, it speaks to the strength of the project and it guarantees further success. Just another thing, the worse the reputation of big Bitcoiners gets, the more integrity you know the project has. You know it's fucked if everyone thinks, oh, in Bitcoin land everyone's so friendly and lovely, which, by the way, we actually are if you're not going to fucking scam people. But supposing you're not having that experience, you're going into Bitcoin and everyone is an asshole to you because you refuse to listen to the reality of the situation. You refuse to accept that your shitcoin, your NFT, doesn't have the properties Bitcoin has just because there's a blockchain involved and all this stuff. You're not magically somehow immutable. You don't have your property rights aren't secured by the laws of maths and physics and all this stuff. They're just secured in a centralized database that can be changed by one party. If you're not willing to accept these claims, then you might start to spread this shit and start to project your own issues onto the Bitcoin community, which is an imaginary construct anyway, by the way, because there is no community in Bitcoin. There's just individual users. Nothing. There's no more prevalent the Ayn Randian individual championing, the championing of the individual ideology than there is in Bitcoin, in its design and in its manifestation. Bitcoin sits there as a shining example of what happens when you put responsibility and liberty down to the individual level. It shows the world what that is. It allows that technologically. It incentivizes that through its design, and it reinforces the structure of how it does that in an increasing feedback loop where those properties do self-reinforce as they grow, and as they grow they reinforce, or as Bitcoin grows it reinforces these properties. And it's fantastic the way it has these positive feedback loops to make it more what it is. Like, Bitcoin was quite centralized at the beginning, understand, and it became more and more decentralized just due to the way it was set up, and that's fantastic. And as miners, you know, coagulate into these pools which become central points of attack and coagulate in certain countries like they had in China, what happens is they get attacked and they get broken up again, and then that it just encourages, you know, the further and further and further decentralization of problems. Like the best example of centralization in Bitcoin at the moment, the lowest hanging fruit, is you have the devs who are all developing, or largely developing, with their full identity out in public, and so Craig comes along and keeps suing them, and one by one all the devs are saying, that's it, I'm not working on Bitcoin Core anymore, I'm done. And people go, oh no, awful. And I'm like, fantastic, because all they're going to do is carry on contributing under an anonymous name, just like Satoshi did in the first place, and like everyone should do. What does that mean? It makes it much harder to bribe people. You know, there's more conflict of interest that can potentially happen if people develop, you know, wide out in the open public. Yeah, it's good for maybe getting some funding and some grants and things like that, but in reality it doesn't make that much difference. You can probably compromise an anonymous developer through financial incentives, but on the other hand, you cannot coerce them like you can if they are out in public. A public developer, yes, they can be bribed to push for malicious changes into Bitcoin, and obviously we rely on the community rejecting their changes, but that can be a bribe, or that can actually be coercion, and coercion is a lot harder to resist if it's done in a nasty enough and serious enough manner. If you're anonymous, there's no coercion possible. Yes, you can still message an anonymous developer who contributed something on GitHub and say, I'll give you $1 million if you push XYZ, and they might accept it. But you're a lot less incentivized to do that if you're a bad actor, because the guy might just take your money and then not do it. And you have no recourse. Bribery always requires, unfortunately, a threat of violence backing the intention of the bribe. So I've just realized this as I've made this point. Developers developing anonymously don't attract bribes the same way that developers developing in public do. So it adds a lot of resilience to Bitcoin's development if we have anonymous developers. And they don't seem to want to do it until they get attacked by Craig, and then they decide to do it. So, like, all of them are obviously saying, I'm not developing anymore for Bitcoin, goodbye. And they're not going to say, I'm going to start just doing it under this anonymous name now, because that would be too obvious, right? We're just expected to read that between the lines. Craig, the idiot that he is, and me being the self-sabotager that I am, don't believe that I'm going to come under Craig's radar anytime soon. He does sue people punitively, and I don't really give a fuck. I want to speak the truth. I don't want to be threatened into compliance. And I know a lot of people in the Bitcoin community that are worried about getting on his radar. I don't think I'm on his radar. Someone can... I'm happy to speak the truth. If my channel explodes to the point where he actually pays attention to me and I get on his radar and he starts creating problems for me, that will suck, but I'll deal with that problem as and when it comes. But for now, I will call it out like it really is in my most toxic, maximalist manner. It's not irrational, it's just me speaking the truth. This guy is a joke, he's a complete fraud, and he's incredibly helpful to us at the moment, coming after centralized points of failure in the Bitcoin network, as all attackers do, and they cause those centralized points of failure to break up. So now he's helping us in that area of centralization. Then the other area of centralization I was talking about, that I always talk about, is centralization of ASIC manufacture. And again, if someone comes along and says, the Chinese government, for example, says, chip fab plants, you are no longer allowed to manufacture ASICs for Bitcoin mining. You have to do it for other stuff because we need these chips for everything else for the greater good, and Bitcoin's illegal and all that stuff. Great. If they do that, then we don't rely on that one part of the world for all the manufacture of Bitcoin's ASICs. I would love to see that. And that's another, it would just be another further strengthening of the Bitcoin network. And yeah, so anyway, that's a nice little ramble on Bitcoin. I always love doing these little adventures down in the Bitcoin rabbit hole and musing on this stuff. But I mean, this idea that, like, being a maximalist, it's a really funny thing because it was just invented as a pejorative term, and like what always happens with persecuted minorities, not that Bitcoin maximalists are suffering to any extent like other persecuted minorities, of course. But the point is, it was a pejorative term, and we appropriated it and said, okay, we're, Max Kaiser calls himself like Bitcoin maximalist, toxic maximalist, or something on Twitter, and he's an old and well-established Bitcoin champion. We call ourselves maximalists because we appropriated the term, but everyone does define it differently. So, in this case, I can only speak to me because this is Bitcoin, and I don't want to imply that there's some group consciousness, because there isn't. It's really a bunch of people independently coming to the same conclusion. Like, if everyone's... This is how I look at Bitcoin. I look at it like everyone is a drought in some ancient desert, Egypt town or something, and finally it rains and there's a reservoir where all the water collects, and everyone goes there to drink water. And someone treats them like a group and says, why have you all decided? And it's like, well, no, every single individual here is thirsty, and we've all gone to where the water is. It wasn't done as a group consciousness thing. We know where the water is. We've all decided to go there. And that's what Bitcoiners are. And that's what generally the correct perspectives are in Bitcoin. The ones that aren't too nuanced and the ones that aren't too counterintuitive. Generally, most Bitcoin maximalists, people that just call themselves Bitcoiners and reject shitcoinism and know that most of what you hear from the establishment and the old guard attacking it is all bullshit and everything like that. Most of these people have just come independently pretty much to the same conclusions, and then get help when it comes to technical stuff, because Bitcoin's really weird and unlike anything else when it comes to technical stuff. You've got a lot of learning to do there. But I feel like people have generally, they're thirsty for a money that works properly, and they come to Bitcoin because it's a rational place for them to be. And then they have this people that are attacking Bitcoin project this a bunch of stuff onto what they perceive as being a group called the Bitcoin maximalists, and they go, you all do this and you all do that, and then we sort of make the mistake of falling into the trap and going, no, we don't do this and that. And I'm making it in this video, and really just everyone's different here. Bitcoin works, and it's appealing to people for obvious reasons, and a bunch of clever people that are capable of saying, I'm not going to listen to what people are telling me about this thing. From what I can see, from first principles, this seems like a great thing. So I'm going to actually stick with it and ignore all these people telling me it's not a great thing. And you can have, it's really nice to be in a tribe. Like, Bitcoiners are a beautiful tribe, don't get me wrong. Like, when I go to small conferences with like 50 people there and they're all really hardcore Bitcoiners, it's like nothing else. I feel like I'm at home with my family. It's beautiful. And you learn stuff from other people, and you adopt behavioral things, and you know, like all the things that can happen in a cult happen, of course. But that, I just figure all that's just part of humans being humans, man. But when people come along and attack us, it's always disingenuous. You know, you can attack the laser eyes, and you can attack the carnivory, and you can attack all these things that are part of Bitcoin's sort of like this sort of these memes, I guess. You can attack them, and sure, but they're not actually Bitcoin, are they? They're not a thing that is necessarily a part of it. They're not the good and bad arguments for Bitcoin and against shitcoins and all that stuff. That's not what any of that stuff is. So you can just leave it alone. And if you're not going to leave it alone and you're going to bring it up, like, it's just never a case where it isn't done in malice or in an effort to muddy the waters, as Alice would say from Blockstream. There's just, everyone is just, it's so fucked up, because this is a space where, like, everyone not only wants you to sign up for their alternative website or their other internet, they literally want you to buy their shitcoin. And they make all these claims that are so, I mean, you always have that rule that it takes 10 times the effort to debunk bullshit than it does to create bullshit. So every time I haven't seen a Vitalik Buterin tweet for years. I don't just have him blocked, I have the name muted, I have the word Ethereum muted, I have misspellings of the word Ethereum muted, I have ETH muted, I have hashtag ETH muted. I don't want to fucking see any of this stuff because it's such a waste of my time, and I never see it, and it's irrelevant to me. I don't go on CoinMarketCap. To me, all this bullshit is the same as people just going to casinos and gambling and then talking about what's hot and what's not. And I'm like, this is all a rigged game, guys. I don't have any interest in being a part of it. Any of the interesting development that's done is never reflected in any of the institutions that support the crypto industry. So we're talking about Binance and Coinbase and these shitcoin casinos. They never adopt any of the technology that gets into Bitcoin. They say Bitcoin's stagnant, but they never pay any attention to it, to any of the development. We just, as a result of the China Bitcoin mining ban and massive backlog of transactions not making it into blocks, we did have finally some adoption of batching and SegWit amongst companies that just do not want to admit Bitcoin is actually making progress technologically. It's not just staying stagnant, even though it would be fine if Bitcoin was stagnant, because it's good enough, and good enough is better than technically better, but useless in terms of network adoption and network effect and resiliency and decentralization and all that stuff. You're never going to have that free miracle again. You're never going to invent Bitcoin 2.0 in a world where Bitcoin 1.0 doesn't exist. You're never going to be able to deal with that. And even if Bitcoin did fail to exist and you did invent Bitcoin 2.0, no one would give a shit, because Bitcoin cannot fail. This is why all the eggs humanity has is in the basket of Bitcoin must succeed. If Bitcoin fails, shitcoins all fail with it, and we're not going to be able to do this again. Whatever we invent that works, this method for solving Byzantine generals problem, proof of work, we only get to fly under the radar during our centralized creation period once. the cat's out of the bag now. If everything went away and we started again and everyone knew what Bitcoin was the minute it was created, it would be destroyed by miners immediately because everyone knows what it is. We only got to fly under the radar for a year or two because no one understood it yet. And once we achieved enough hash rate that people were really genuinely incentivized to, if I have computing power to mine, I'm actually more financially incentivized to add strength to that network rather than attack it. You're not going to be able to do that. You'd have to contrive some sort of, I don't know, I don't even want to think about it, but it's just so awful, the idea that we'd be in that position, because I don't think we could pull it off. But nonetheless, oh God, you just have this context of crypto existing and wishing death on Bitcoin all the time because they don't think it might help, but they're trying to scare other people that might put money in Bitcoin into going, maybe I'll just put 60% in Bitcoin and 40% in ETH, because that's a win. That's a massive win for Ethereum when they do that. And that means someone's managed to convince someone that they need to have a diverse portfolio of cryptos rather than find the one that actually does the job it claims to be doing and stay away from all of the bullshit salesman nonsense. And I've done a whole video on NFTs. I'm not doing an NFT rant tonight. No way. I've done it enough. Every day there's some rant I've got to have on NFTs on Spaces or something like that. No more, guys. NFTs are... I honestly think that at this point, if you're attracted to NFTs, you should go and buy an NFT and then just learn that way that these things are nonsense, rather than have someone logically explain why they're worth nothing, why there aren't any other claims they pretend about immutability and about property rights and all that stuff. I think forget all that. Just go and buy one and get burnt and then come on back to Bitcoin. Like, it's a beautiful thing when someone sells their last shitcoin and they go, that's it, I'm full in Bitcoin now. I got wrecked too many times. I was trying to outsmart things. I'm not an insider. I don't know when they're going to pump 40%. Like, that's great. Come on back to Bitcoin. Make an honest gain. Like, you don't need a gain. Any Satoshi you buy is a gain. Any Satoshi you sell is a loss. Doesn't matter what the dollar valuation is. That's not the right way to look at it. Still thinking in terms of investment. It's not an investment. Not in the traditional sense. Yeah, owning Bitcoin is an investment in your own future, but it's not, oh, I put in $2,000 and made $500 in 3 months. Like, please, like, this is not the point of what we're doing here. Look at the world around you. Look at the instability. Look at the reality of hyperinflation. Find a real arc in the storm. Find a lifeboat. That is Bitcoin. Take it seriously. Commit to it. Learn about it. Don't fuck around with shitcoins. Don't waste the time of people that are trying to help you. Don't call them toxic maximalists. Appreciate why they have the position they do, and approach them genuinely with curiosity and humility. And you're probably just going to get the best free education you could ever get, because all we want to do is teach people how this thing works. We love it. Like, I was speaking for myself. I need to stop saying we so much. I love teaching people how Bitcoin works, and anyone that's genuinely curious, I love explaining it to them. But no more devil's advocates all the time. And please be genuine in what you do, and then you'll find me, at least. I speak for myself. I love teaching people how Bitcoin works. I love getting requests. I love it when someone asks me a question I don't know the answer to and I have to research it. That's my favorite thing. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be shown that I'm wrong. But I don't want to be shown I'm wrong by someone that prevents me a weak argument that I refute, and they pretend I didn't refute it. That's really annoying because it's a waste of my time. And I don't want to have my time wasted. And moreover, if we're talking in public on a Spaces or something like that, and there's a couple hundred people listening, and you're peddling bullshit about NFTs, and I point out that it's nonsense, that is not because it might be mean to you, and I might be harsh with it, but as far as I'm concerned, 200 people just heard the truth, And if your retort is that I'm a nasty guy or I'm toxic, I don't fucking care, because I just hopefully gave 200 people a light bulb going off in their head where they're thinking, oh, good point, I hadn't thought of that. And this happens all the time, and I know it happens because every time I'm in a spaces, I get like, if I make a good point, I'll get like 8 or 9 DMs just saying like, fuck, I hadn't realized that, or good point, or something like that. And this is really encouraging, and it shows that the people listening want to learn. And then you get, it's always a great opportunity when a scammer comes up, or a .eth or something like that, and they want to make ridiculous claims. You can either have a room full of Mike Alfreds and people like that will put up with it and look at everything from some boring, like old finance perspective, where they're just talking about investment and just nonsense, and all of the Bitcoin they don't own because it's all sitting in GBTC, and they're not anything. They're just not even Bitcoiners by any stretch of the imagination. They're just sort of in it for the clout, and they don't really care about the ideology, and they don't care about the liberty and all of the higher aims of Bitcoin. They're just there, and you get these circle jerk respectful rooms where you'll have some Bitcoiners that own a bit of ETH and some NFTs, and they think NFTs are kind of stupid, but they own some anyway, and they think ETH can't really do what Bitcoin does, but they own some anyway, and and they talk, it just drives me nuts. And then scammers come up and they give them the time of day, and everyone just gets to respectfully, politely just promote their own fucking bags. And then when you get a toxic maximalist come into the room, what the toxic maximalist does is they call bullshit on all of these people that are just trying to circle jerk each other and all pump each other's bags and actually shed some truth. And it's fucking uncomfortable, but I tell you what, doesn't matter, because those rooms have so much more people. I mean, a couple of months ago, we had someone come into the room that was, obviously trying to sell some bullshit, and I think it was me and Shinobi, and neither one of us would let him off the hook. We're like, no, you're making false claims over and over again. And it's so uncomfortable, but no one leaves because it's actually really fun. It's really boring in rooms where everyone just agrees with everyone else out of politeness because everyone wants to come across as, family friendly and invest in my product, and we're all so wonderful, and circle jerk, circle jerk, circle jerk. No. I love it when you get these Bitcoin maxis, the people that do, I don't do it that much, but Shinobi does it a lot. We'll just get these people make absurd claims, and then we just go no, and we just absolutely tear them to pieces, because those arguments are really bad, and they are done in the purpose, they are done with the intention of stealing money from gullible people, and I'm not letting you get away with that. No fucking way. I'm not the bad guy in that situation. You are. And the reason you're calling me the bad guy is because I've exposed your bullshit, and it's caused you to have to look in a mirror uncomfortably and go, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to confront this bullshit about myself. This Web 3.0 crap that I'm pushing, this fucking nonsense, this NFT thing, this bollocks that I'm doing, that I'm saying is on the blockchain, all this nonsense. I don't want to accept that I have no purpose in life other than to try and get through the one day to the next and never really confront the reality about how I earn my living and all that stuff. No, these fucking people are rude, they're childish, they're all in their mother's basement, all blah, blah, blah. But I'm not in my mother's basement. I'm in my own basement of my own fucking house. And the reason I have a house and a family and all of these things that I'm proud to have achieved in my life, and I feel like I'm good, and I feel like every day I'm getting more and more confident in what I'm doing, and more close to what I feel is the right path to do, because it's hard figuring out what the right thing to do is. I finally feel like I'm getting somewhere with all that stuff, and it's why I'm grateful again for all the tyranny and all the COVID nastiness that's going on. It's making life easier and easier in a way, because doing the right thing is just such a commitment now that once you start, you couldn't even look back. You're like, God, if I had gone down the wrong path, I'd have had 3 shots I didn't want by now, and I'd have had to participate in something I just increasingly hate, and I'm not going to have my children treated like that. I'm not going to put up with that, and this gets easier and easier and easier. But when we come across people with no integrity who want to scam other people and want to play nice and be given a reasonable platform for their scam, this is the one thing that collectively always defines toxic maximalists consistently, is that we just won't put up with it, because we think Bitcoin's too important and we think it's too complicated. The combination of those two things means that muddying the waters is just too easy. So people come along and they go, oh yeah, man, like, I can't believe it. It's so great that El Salvador has adopted crypto. And I think it leads to, and we go, fuck off. No, they fucking didn't adopt crypto. They adopted Bitcoin because the country is not, these guys are serious about what they're doing. They're taking on the IMF and the United States government. They're not fucking gambling with Ethereum and Dogecoin. They're not trying to fucking make a quick gain, and they're not trying to pump their bags on gullible noobs. They are serious about what they're doing. Think about El Salvador and Bukele, whatever you like. But the point is, they're using technology that can actually mean they can resist that level of tyranny. The IMF. They are actually using technology that's capable of it. Okay? They are not adopting crypto. Fuck out of here with that. And we called out Brian Armstrong on that on Tone Vay's news show. Me and I think it was Patrick Motorist. We said, yeah, we've looked through. Shout out to Grubels, I think was the first one to notice it. But we said to Grubels pointed out, Brian Armstrong has never mentioned the words Lightning Network or El Salvador ever. And here's the guy who runs for a long time the biggest crypto exchange in the world. Allegedly, once upon a time, a champion of Bitcoin, and he was actually until about 2015, and then he became someone that literally refused to say the word Bitcoin for 3 years. He refused to say the word. He said it's all about crypto. This Bitcoin maximalism is so toxic, it's detrimental to the industry, blah, blah. And it is. Bitcoin maximalism is toxic to the crypto industry, because if people buy crypto, as in they buy Bitcoin and send it to their cold card, done. Crypto exchange only makes that much commission. However, if they buy 20,000 shitcoins in a diverse portfolio of cryptos, the exchange makes 20,000 times more in commission. So there's their motive, there's their incentive, and they pretend it's magnanimous, and they think, oh, we need this thing to grow, it's so good for developing economies and poor people and blah blah blah. Bollocks, you're lying, you're fucking lying. All you want is more commission, and you're selling shit to people so that they can come along and buy shit, because you make more of a commission when they buy a diverse portfolio of shit rather than one thing and one thing only. Because if they buy one thing instead of 20,000 things, you make 20,000, a 20,000th of what you could have. And this corrupts your motives to the extreme points. And this is why exchanges like Swan and River and Bull Bitcoin that only let you buy Bitcoin. Some of them won't even let you sell Bitcoin, but they only deal with Bitcoin. And that's the right way to do things. That's integrity. That's not wasting people's time. That's not benefiting off communication and all. I want to finish the point I was making at the start of whatever this train of thought was, which is Bitcoiners know that this thing is complicated to understand. So when people come along and they say, blockchain, El Salvador's adopting crypto, this is so good to see because this and that, and they'll be able to use NFT. No, Bitcoiners are not going to have it. Toxic maximalists are not fucking going to have that, because we know what you're trying to do. You're trying to confuse gullible people. They didn't adopt crypto. They adopted Bitcoin, and they're not the fucking same thing. And it's so disingenuous to conflate the two. And you know what you're doing. And you take advantage of the fact that these 200 people listening to this Spaces, or these 1,000 people that liked your tweet, or whatever platform it was, or whatever news show it was you were on where you were celebrating it in order to further your own selfish interests that are not in alignment with anyone else's, by the way. You knew what you were doing, and we didn't let you get away with it. And now, to the people watching, you're trying to convince the people watching that we are toxic for approaching the debate in the way we did. And that is your best line of defense for what you were trying to push on people, which is shit. And I love it, because that is a context in which people can say, so some guy came in here and he was making a whole bunch of wild promises, and it all sounded amazing, and it made me feel clever listening to the guy, and I felt like I was part of a revolution called blockchain technology and all this stuff. And then this asshole came in the room and sort of showed no respect to anyone, and I didn't really like the guy, and he was called toxic by everyone else. But I think I have to admit to myself that nothing the toxic guy said actually anyone had any response to. So probably the toxic guy was right. and that other guy that called him a toxic asshole was just wrong, and that's why he was calling him toxic. I'm happy with that. Okay, like, I've tried being civil to the most extent that I can, and I think it's kind of helpful, but it's a real tightrope. Like today in my debate with this Bitcoin SV retard, I was just saying, like, okay, like, you need to, you cannot, I try to ask questions more to expose the ignorance of people that push scams. I try to ask questions, because if you're left stuck answering a question, you know, that's when you're trying to sell something. Like, yeah, you can dodge it. Like, there are difficult questions to answer even in Bitcoin, you know, but no one ever asks them. No one that wants to put you on the spot as a Bitcoiner, you know, no one actually wants to put you on the spot. They want to find a solution to the real problems Bitcoin has. Like, anyone with a shitcoin that comes along and says, you know, let's put this Bitcoiner on the spot, ask him a difficult question he doesn't want to answer. First off, if you come at me with something like that, I'll give you a real response, because Bitcoin does have real problems and I want to figure out the solutions to them, of course. But shitcoiners never come with the real problems, because the real problems are just as prevalent in shitcoin land as they are everywhere else. Like, the main one, the big problem Bitcoin always had wasn't just these pockets of centralization, it was always scaling, because scaling is difficult, and that was always a problem. But no shitcoin has ever complained about Bitcoin can't scale. We can, because that was always a direct nod to the fact that they were completely centralized. Yes, if you're centralized, you can scale up immediately to cover the planet. Congrats, you are something like PayPal with PayPal coin. You are a centralized monetary network. Who gives a fuck? No one gave a shit about any of that. No one ever came at us with scaling issues, because anything that tried to be Bitcoin 2.0 and actually tried to copy the architecture of the network a bit as well, and tried to fly under the radar and get enough hash rate and, you know, be a proof of work thing as well, like Monero and things like that, they don't attack us when it comes to scaling, because all of them have a feature Bitcoin doesn't have, which makes scaling an order of magnitude harder, usually. In the case of Monero and in the case of Ethereum, they're both an order of magnitude harder to scale. So, I mean, Monero is potentially infinitely harder to scale. I don't know exactly, but it's definitely worse. So Bitcoin has a scaling problem, and if shitcoiners want to come along and say, how are you going to scale? Well, like, it's going to be difficult, but we're doing our best. How about you? Have you solved that problem? No, because you're in a much worse situation than we are, because you have a massive feature set that makes maintaining decentralization really hard, and it's hard enough in Bitcoin as it is. So if you're saying it's a problem in Bitcoin, I'd agree with you, but you're not making the argument for your own project at all any easier, because your project has the same problem, but it's 10 times more difficult. So Monero is the best example of that, because scaling Monero is impossible. The only reason it's even alive is because there's only 5 transactions or something in every block. The minute they're like, we want everyone to use Monero, I'm like, you don't want that, because if everyone does, the project dies immediately. So, you know, some of us are happy Monero exists for certain purposes every now and again, but I could take it or leave it, really. I think the reality of using Monero in a way where you don't accidentally ruin your privacy, and privacy and anonymity are like the feature they have in Monero that Bitcoin doesn't have, and the cost is centralization, of course, and that means the project has no future. But let's ignore that. Monero offering what it does offer, it can only offer it in this short window of time where it's not yet successful enough that it becomes a victim of its own success and unable to scale. Like, Bitcoin almost became a victim of its own success because it has a hard time scaling. Like, we're doing it with these secondary layers like Liquid and Lightning and things like that. You know, we're doing something. Like, we're doing the best we can, and we're still getting our free miracles in Bitcoin. Blocks are pretty much consistently full, but there's not a lot of, at the same time, there's not a lot of spam. Okay, there's no definition for spam in Bitcoin. Every transaction's valid because everything costs money, but Bitcoin is able to, basically it's reached an equilibrium for the time being. I mean, most of the miners incentive comes from freshly mined bitcoins rather than block rewards. Transaction fees, which make up the block reward portion of what the miners pay themselves when they mine blocks. They're doing well. They're getting paid enough, and the incentive is there for them to secure the network as that part of the ecosystem. That's all good. It remains to be seen whether Bitcoin is going to work decades from now, when the block reward of newly mined blocks is, or fresh Bitcoins minted rather, are so small that they become negligible in comparison to transaction fees. It remains to be seen whether there's enough of a fee market to sustain the incentive for miners. We hope so. It's a theory. No one's saying it definitely works. There's even theories out there or proposals out there. I'm going to say the ideas thrown out there. They're not proposals yet, but things like Peter Todd saying we could change Bitcoin to have a perpetual 1% inflation rate, 1% per year, to incentivize mining. And obviously that makes people go, what the fuck are you talking about? 21 million is sacred in Bitcoin. We will never ever go above the 21 million Bitcoin limit. And, but we might. But when I say we, there is no we. Is my node going to accept a block that, that is mined by a miner that pays them more coins than it's supposed to, according to the code I'm running now? Who knows? If miners are dropping off like flies 30 years from now, maybe as a community, and the community of node runners, which is decentralized and distributed enough around the world, maybe we decide to do that. Who knows? I'm not going to say we don't do that, because this is Bitcoin, and we actually are open-minded when it comes to how we're going to do this thing, but we just think in terms of decades, and we're serious about it. We're not throwing our weight around and, making absurd claims that are, that we make this claim today and it turns out, $300 million that was invested because of this claim turned out to be bullshit by Thursday. And then on Friday I tweeted this. Like, that's shitcoin land. We don't do that stuff. This is Bitcoin. We're thinking in terms of decades here. And we have some theories. We have some ideas. We're quietly optimistic about them. We're cautious. We're approaching this thing with adversarial mentality. We thought of every problem before anyone that attacks Bitcoin thought of it. We thought of them all years ago. There's this running meme that every single criticism of Bitcoin, or every proposal for an improvement, or every shitcoin feature was an idea on bitcointalk.org in 2011 that was one post that someone debunked immediately and was obviously figured out to be a shitty idea. Very, like, even Turing completeness, right? Which is what Ethereum offers, and I say offers in quotes. People are like, why don't we make Bitcoin Turing complete? And people are like, no. Here's why we don't have Turing completeness in Bitcoin. And long story short, it compromises security in a bunch of ways and makes scaling harder. I think that's correct. Anyway, Ethereum comes along and says, we're offering Turing completeness. Isn't that awesome? And Ethereum is hot garbage, and it's totally unworkable, unwieldy, like trends towards centralization. Is in this perfect hellish nightmare between being decentralized enough that it's impossible for anyone. It's awkward and unwieldy to control and requires an immense amount of infrastructure and work trying to keep the thing afloat. And at the same time centralized enough that it doesn't have any of the resilience that you get when you are genuinely decentralized. So if you do something Vitalik doesn't like, he will just pull the rug on you and change the way Ethereum works to fuck with you. And you don't have the offer of a genuine decentralized system where you're free to do as you like within the rules of the system, because the rules can't be changed on you. You don't have that in Ethereum. So you have this exact mix of the worst of both worlds. So the fact that you have all that stuff, and the fact that they are doing things that were ideas long ago in Bitcoin that people chose not to do, but they chose not to do them, or they chose not to follow these ideas because there was an atmosphere of relative calm and competence and passion and vision. There was so much of that back in the early days, and it's all still there, and I'm reinvigorated, and I love Bitcoin more than I've ever loved it. Like, it increases. I get more and more grateful every day that it exists, and I think it gets stronger as a project consistently, and I love seeing it get adopted around the world. It's just incredible, guys. Um, it's just that the way it existed at the beginning was, it was a different world back then, but everything got discussed in a way where ideas were considered, and anything that's not in Bitcoin at this point, they are. I mean, even the Taproot upgrade, it was, it was a final manifestation of Mast, which is, it's just an extension of what Mast offers, which is Merkleized abstract syntax trees. That was in the works for years, man. That was 8 years ago, I think, that the first proposal for Mast, structures came into the notion of, and it just means that you can have complicated scripts in Bitcoin, and you don't need to reveal the fact that there were other conditions in which the coin, the transaction can be presented as valid. Like you can redeem in different states without revealing other states. So that saves space on the blockchain, and it also is good for privacy, because it means that if there were 8 conditions under which a coin could be spent and you choose condition number 6, you don't need to reveal condition number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. You just those are gone, because all you need is the Merkle root, because it's a Merkleized abstract syntax tree. You just take the Merkle root and the leaf, and then one branch, one path through the tree to the leaf, and that's all you need, and that saves space and it maintains privacy. And that wasn't possible, and we wanted Mast forever, and it took like 8 years. I wasn't even aware of it until 2017, and then it took another 4 years from then, to come out. I think it finally became, Taproot became the final manifestation of the Mast idea, and then it got combined with the first part of Schnorr-SIGs, and all that happened, and we finally got it in, and now it's active on the network, and now people are using it. And someone came out the other day and was like, lol, Bitcoin's so stagnant, Taproot got activated, and only 0.15% adoption on the Bitcoin network. This was some Ethereum guy laughing at Bitcoin, going, lol, it's so shit, there's only 0.15% adoption of Taproot addresses in Bitcoin network. And all the Bitcoiners are immediately just like, what? We already have that many people using Taproot? We need to slow the fuck down. Like, there might be something wrong with it. We need to be very careful, because again, we're thinking in terms of decades. We're not thinking in terms of weeks or hours or days. We're not doing that. I'm happy to see no one use Taproot for another 5 years while we figure out all of everything that can be done, and be very careful with it, and make sure there's no bugs. And this is not Ethereum. This is not the DAO, where we had the world's biggest crowdfund ever, and $300 million gets dumped into a project in an hour, and then there's a bug in it, and then Ethereum hard forks and creates 2 different networks, one called Ethereum and one called Ethereum Classic. Like, please, guys, we're not doing that kind of stuff. We are serious about this project, and I hope that comes across. I hope people understand the kind of commitment and priority and what's the best word to describe it? The sheer amount of importance we place on Bitcoin as a tool for humanity cannot be understated, and Bitcoiners are committed to it. And this is why we don't fuck around, and this is why we don't tolerate scammers in our midst, and this is why we don't want people to get misled. Because it doesn't just suck to see people invest in scams. It really sucks to see people get into Bitcoin, then get into crypto, then get fucked by crypto, and then just write off the whole space, including Bitcoin. That happens all the time, and that's really painful when that happens, because Bitcoin's the best thing ever, crypto is the shittest thing ever, and crypto's so bad that it can fuck up people's perception of Bitcoin too. And they are associated, despite being basically opposite things. I mean, everything that makes Bitcoin is the same thing that makes shitcoins not Bitcoin. It's so blindingly obvious. It's so painful there, but it's always just one step below the surface. You can always copy what's on the surface of Bitcoin, and you can never copy what's under the surface. You can never copy the hundreds of thousands of nodes. You can never copy the primitiveness of what the Bitcoin network does, so that it can be distributed easily. You can never copy that, because why would you? Would you make something that's Bitcoin but even more basic? Like, here's what you want to do if you want to sell me on your shitcoin. You've got to take Bitcoin. I'm going on forever on this video, but whatever. Here's what you got to do if you want to sell me on your shitcoin. You take all of Bitcoin's parameters and you make them even worse. You make them even, and I mean worse with, I'm saying you remove features. Like, you have to start with all of the things Bitcoin got wrong, any little inefficiencies, you get rid of them so it can scale better in the first place, and you make blocks smaller so you can have even less transactions in blocks. That's how you sell me on your shitcoin, because I'm like, that thing might last 500 years. That is cautious engineering. That's something you can invest in and then go into a coma for 20 years and come out and it might still exist. If Bitcoin didn't exist already, but Bitcoin exists and it's good enough, so no one's going to pay attention to the more cautious versions of Bitcoin that are released. And of course no one goes that route anyway. They go the opposite way, which is we're doing Bitcoin with more, with boom, bash, brighter lights, bigger blocks, more transactions, Turing completeness, more complicated scripting, more smart contracts. I mean, there are smart contracts in Bitcoin, even though they pretend there aren't, but all of these things, they always say more features, and they never say what the trade-off is. I'm so ridiculous and so anal about this that I will say, give me Bitcoin with less features and I will look at it, because maybe that thing is capable of achieving a greater level of decentralization. Like, I mean, this was Elon Musk's smug point where he's like, why don't you make blocks smaller then? If small blocks are so good, why don't you make them smaller? Then it would be even better, right? That was Elon's point. And I was like, yeah, well, we've been trying to do that for a while, actually, but there isn't consensus around it, so we're not going to do it. Like Luke and me and maybe Shinobi and, like, I don't know, maybe there's like a 200 or 300 people in the world that want smaller blocks. I'm one of them, but I only want it in the context of a lot more people wanting it, because I'm not going to fuck up and and create all that division and that political awfulness in the community for that few people, because it's actually not the right thing to do. Like, I don't want to do it if I don't gauge that there's community consensus for it. I put out a poll on Twitter a few months ago saying, do you support the reduction in Bitcoin's block size? And everyone, like most of the people that I really like and respect in the Bitcoin community, were like, nope, no way. And I'm not going to work against those people, because I think we're just going to accept that Bitcoin is good enough. It really is. Even though we could potentially conceivably do it quite trivially if there was a desire for it to make blocks smaller. I think the reason we want blocks smaller is because we really, really just want more nodes on the network. Again, my language analogy, we want more people speaking English, so we've got to delete a whole bunch of words to make it just an easier language for younger people to learn, make it more useful, more accessible, and then more people run it, and then the language is more widely spoken, and it gets harder for any central party to control it, to delete words, to change the meanings of words, things like that. The more people speak the language, the harder it gets to do that. That's why we always limit, apparently, and cripple the Bitcoin network, as the Craig Wright fanboys will say. We crippled it because we kept blocks small, but they never talk about what the trade-off is. And the trade-off is centralization every time. So anyway, that was a fun little ramble. Toxic Bitcoin maximalists. We are not toxic. We are only toxic. I am only toxic, and I'm not especially toxic. I'm not a particularly confrontational person. I say that, I think that's just because I go from 0 to 100 pretty quick, and I'm nice until I'm not, and I don't get the casual confrontation thing. I never understood that. Like, I'll be very friendly and very nice until you do the wrong thing, and then, well, I don't know. It's best we don't really explore what happens there too much, because I don't spend too much time in that territory, and I don't even know what to expect of myself when I'm pushed to the edge. So generally, I don't want to know. I don't want to find out. But we live in a very conflict-averse culture at the moment. So when it comes to people, having disagreements and all that stuff, I'm finding my way when it comes to combating obvious well-polished suits trying to scam their way into the Bitcoin influencer space. These people like Mike Alfred, who I've mentioned already, and all of these GBTC guys who are coming around and saying Bitcoin needs this and we need to vote for that politician, and we need to be nicer to people on Twitter, we're too toxic and all this stuff. All these people can absolutely go and fuck themselves. I hope this is when the benefit of Bitcoin just crashing and crashing, because it just wipes out all these people. They just get out of Bitcoin, and then it goes up again, because you eventually find these holders of last resort, to quote Trace Mayer. And then once those holders of last resort have been established, the price is nowhere to go but up, because the only people that own coins at that point are people that just are not going to sell them, and then they can't be bought for anyone, by anyone. So the price can only go in one direction when that happens, and then it goes up a lot, and then it attracts a lot of people, and some of them go down the right way. Some of them, 3 or 4% of these new wave people, will get Bitcoin. They will listen to the people with integrity, the toxic ones. They will listen to them, they will learn from them, they will become toxic themselves to future scammers. And every cycle this happens. But I mean, the cycles are over. I don't want to talk about cycles because I think they're an illusion. I think we went up a lot in 2013 and we went up a lot in 2017. That's it. They were 2 hype cycles, but I don't believe in the 4-year cycle. Go back and check my video on why I'm not selling the tip to buy the dip, because I don't believe that cycle is a real thing. It was based on the halvings, but the halvings are less and less relevant every time they happen as well. So anyway, let's just end this video. Holy shit. If anyone watches this whole video, let me know in the comments. I feel like someone actually will watch this whole thing. I get a lot of people telling me they just turn on a video of mine and then just fall asleep to it. That's cool. Feel free to request topics, guys. As always, I enjoy making it. There's more and more people have been asking me to make a video on compiling Bitcoin Core in Windows. And I've tried to make it twice, and I can't fucking do it, because Windows is the most annoying. It's so annoying, guys. When you're used to either Mac or Linux, which work exactly the same way, because they are both Unix-like, when you go back to Windows and you open up the instructions in Bitcoin Core to how to compile Bitcoin Core in Windows, and the first line of the instructions is install Linux, you go, why the fuck? I mean, Satoshi originally wrote Bitcoin in Windows, which is another one of these free miracles we have. I don't know, man. Like, I will eventually make the video on how to compile Bitcoin Core in Windows, but ultimately you do just have to install Ubuntu to do it. That's 2 of the 3 methods they give you to install to compile Bitcoin Core in Windows. So I'm just like, this does feel a bit redundant. If you just go to step 1, install Linux. Step 2, install compile Bitcoin using Linux the way you genuinely would. You're just using Windows with Linux sitting inside of it. Like, do I really need to make a video on that? I don't know. Like, and what's more annoying about it is I can't seem to get it to fucking work, and I just, every time I do it, I'm just like, which is so stupid, guys, because I really want to bring you that video, and I actually think it would be really helpful. Okay, I've convinced myself. I am going to bring you a guide for how to compile Bitcoin Core in Windows. It's going to be the most annoying video ever. I'm going to do it. I hope someone benefits from it. It's always great to compile the software yourself rather than just download binaries. That knowledge should be out there in the world. It should be taught in school. You should be able to compile software by the time you're 6. It's not very difficult. Learning how to use Git, learning how to use package managers, learning how to use Bash, any of these things, Shell, learning like a bit of Python even, like write a basic script, you know, and then just moving on to basics of computer science like data structures, stacks, you know, things like that. It can, graphs, you know, all of these things are not super difficult. They're not out of the reach of anyone, and they can be taught so young, and people will just, it can all be, I don't even understand this stuff well enough at all to teach it, but if you get it, I believe that they're the kinds of things that if they are understood well, they'd be very easy to teach and to communicate. And now that Python exists and it's such a good and easy language to teach, everyone can learn the basics of object-oriented programming, and then they can migrate to other languages that use the same principles that are way more I don't know what the word is, verbose. That might be the right word, but you know, JavaScript and C++. If you want to work on Bitcoin Core and all this stuff. Anyway, I'm going off on massive tangents now. I've lost the thread. Thanks so much for watching this video. Do let me know if you made it to the end, and do let me know if you have a specific topic to discuss. I'm literally ending it here. Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.